Welcome to the Novel Idea Society for October. And We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kliever. And I checked, if you weren't here, that's how you say his last name, which is important. As someone whose last name is always mispronounced, last names are important. Marcus, thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course.
I am supposed to tell you right off the hop, there are a few people who couldn't make it tonight, but I am supposed to tell you it made their head explode. Where did this book come from? I'm going to pretend that I haven't read all the things about Reddit and all of your background, and I want to hear it from you. So what's going on in your head?
Yeah, so I guess it kind of started as a little seed of something back when I was a kid. We were driving past an old house my parents used to live in, and the current owner was out there washing his car. And, he kind of came over and made some small talk with my dad. And then just before he was about to leave, he says, "Oh, did you ever notice anything strange about the house?" And it was, and then he went on to tell a bunch of ghost stories and stuff. And yeah, I think I was around 8 years old when it happened, and it just kind of stuck with me and sparked into the novel.
So when did you start actually writing it down?
2020 or so. Like I never, that memory was always very vivid to me, but it never struck me as something that could be a story until around 2020.
Was this a pandemic project?
It was, yeah.
Tell me how this became your pandemic project, and tell me how Reddit falls into this, because you're very Reddit famous.
Yeah, so I've been writing on and off on a subreddit called No Sleep. For people unfamiliar, just view it as a forum, and a subreddit is a sub forum. And I was writing horror stories on there here and there for the past, decade or so. And I hadn't written on there for quite a while when I saw this article being like, oh, two brothers sell their Reddit story to Netflix for 7 figures. And I thought, well, shit, I used to, oh, sorry, I can't.
You can swear, it's fine.
Oh, I can? Okay. I thought, well, I used to write on there and I did all right. I should start doing that again. And my plan was, start a Patreon, maybe sell t-shirts. And then in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, maybe these Hollywood guys will reach out to me. And sure enough, about 3 months into it, that's exactly what happened. And kind of catapulted a Reddit version of this novel into a Netflix deal. And then we're able to leverage a separate novel deal out of that. And yeah, and it just hasn't slowed down since. So yeah.
Before this, what do you do for a living? Do you still do that for a living?
I was doing a mix of stop motion animation, landscaping, film set kind of stuff here and there. But yeah, just scraping by. And I was basically unemployed when this happened. I was on CERB, the $2,000 a month thing. So yeah.
So has this book changed your life?
Yeah, completely. I'm still kind of processing it, to be honest. It's quite a whiplash, but yeah.
So when you said, and we'll talk about your writing process in a little bit, but I want to talk more about the roller coaster that it was to getting this published. How did you get a message? Did you believe it was real? Like, walk me through those moments of like, because you're writing on a forum, so it could be anyone. So how did you get approached, and how did those conversations go? As much as you can tell us anyway, because of like legal stuff, obviously.
Yeah, so I got a DM on Reddit and immediately thought I was getting scammed. But of course, I'm gonna follow through, don't give them my credit card number. And then I think literally the next day I was in a Zoom meeting with Scott Glassgold, who's now my manager, and a guy named Dan Kagan, who's some big producer. Like he produced Long Legs that just came out, and he'd done a bunch of movies before that. And yeah, I was in a Zoom meeting with these two guys, and they were like, "What are you working on? What do you think can what do you want to do? What's your ideas? That kind of thing." And so we went with We Used to Live Here, and yeah, and then the rest is kind of history. So it's been pretty crazy.
So was the movie stuff planned before the novel was written?
Yeah, so it was a Reddit for initially it was a one-part series on Reddit that was too quick. and I'd always wanted to expand it because it was my most popular story. And so then we turned it into a 4-part series and then sold it to Netflix. And then I think about a week after is when we sold the book rights as well. So yeah.
You know, it doesn't usually go that way, right? Like usually the
Yeah.
book comes before the movie.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very unconventional path to where I am for sure.
Are you more married to the book or to the movie?
Definitely to the book. Like that's my baby. I control, I have say over every single punctuation mark in that thing. And the movie, I'm very hands off by design. I don't want I either want all the creative control or none of it is what I've been saying. And so it's kind of like you guys do your thing and you know, Hollywood will do what Hollywood does and hopefully it's great. And yeah.
Is it in progress as we speak? Like, are they working on it as we speak?
Yeah, pre-production, but it's Hollywood, so anything can happen. But the book doing well should certainly help kick things
Do
into
you,
gear as well.
do you know who's going to be in it?
Right now, Blake Lively's attached to Star, and that's all I can say.
That's a big deal, dude.
Yeah,
I mean, it helps that you're in Vancouver and Ryan Reynolds is from Vancouver, so you can pull the whole like we're like a Canadian family
right,
uh
right.
connection. That's really cool though. What does your family say about all of this?
They're obviously super happy for me. Yeah, and I think they're just as kind of whiplashed by it as I am. But yeah, super happy for me and super supportive. So it's been nice to have that.
Why horror?
It's um it's just what I find easiest to write. I think I kind of
Why?
it's funny because people say, "Oh, you seem so sweet," and it's like, well, maybe it's because I write horror that I am. I'm able to get this stuff out in a healthy way and, take the things that disturb me and put them into a controllable form and a therapeutic kind of outlet. So yeah, it's just something I've always been fascinated by. When I was a kid, we weren't allowed to watch horror, so that just made it that much more enticing. And yeah, that's all I can really say about it.
So when did you start writing horror short stories and things like that? And what were they about? Like, are you I say that as someone who's leaned into horror movies in October because I have no time for anything Halloween fun. There's certain things I will and won't watch, and I can't do ghosts. I don't know what it is about ghosts. I can't watch ghosts. I can read about ghosts. I can watch the goriest things in the world. They don't bother me. So what did you write about? What do you find most comfortable writing?
Well, it's funny. The very first horror story I ever came up with, I never wrote it down. It was just something I told to some very close friends of mine when I was like maybe 15 or 16 years old. And it was like a monster movie about some hunters that get invited to go on a hunting trip and then start getting taken out by some monster. And and yeah, I guess ever since then it's just been sorry, I lost track. What was the question again?
What do you like to write about?
Oh, yeah. I like to write about things that maybe seem normal on the surface, but then there's one little thing that's off about it, or one little kind of nagging question, and just kind of build from there. Um, so I guess uncanny horror would be somehow some people
Okay.
characterize it. Yeah.
What is that what you mostly have you written other kinds of horror?
Yeah, I've written like I wrote an airplane thriller that's like very much over the top kind of action horror. I've written that's not posted online anywhere. I've written uh, mystery horror kind of I'm not exclusive to any subgenre. I kind of love it all. So
Is that what you watch? Is that what you listen to? Like, is that your dark space?
no, I mean I used to, but I find I'm gravitating more towards lighter fare lately. when I am watching stuff. So I think it's because I'm writing horror all day. I kind of need something chill at the end of the day.
Okay,
Yeah.
so tell me about your writing process. Is this a plot things out? I know where I'm going. I just had to figure out how to get there, or do you fly by the seat of your pants?
I'm definitely both. I like to sort of, I call it like scouting parties where I'll sort of just start writing very loosely, usually in present tense, almost outline, but not quite, and just kind of exploring different paths that the story could go. It's really rough. It'll be like Eve walks into a room, Eve sees an object, Eve picks it up. Eve hears a scary sound behind her. She turns to it. Then she has an argument with so like it can be that, and then all of a sudden it can flow into hyper detail if I'm really feeling something. And then that way it's kind of like I'm sending up these scouting parties into the dark, and if it goes to a dead end, I haven't spent all that time perfecting the prose. Um, and then eventually one of those paths will hit where I want to go, and that's where I go. But it's very discovery style writing, so very little outlining for sure.
Do you have a mentor or someone who helped you kind of perfect the way that you write, or did you just get better as the more you wrote type thing, like practice makes perfect type thing?
I mean, I've had lots of great teachers throughout my life, and like even just reading books like On Writing by Stephen King. But I think it really just had to be trial and error mostly, just kind of trying what worked for somebody, that doesn't work for me, and then I'm honestly still figuring it out to figure out what works best for me. Yeah.
Why was it important for you to have a queer couple in your story? Because it's something we don't see a lot of in mainstream horror fiction. I mean, we're starting to see more of it, but I'm curious why you decided to include it.
It's weird, like I honestly don't even think of it as a decision. It's just something that very naturally arose. It was one of the first things and I always thought it's pretentious when authors say this, like, oh, the character spoke, but it really was. And it was the first scene I wrote was the first scene in the book, even in the earliest version of the story. And it was Eve at the door with the family, and she needs an excuse. And so she says her girlfriend can't be there. And then the mother in the original story kind of flinches at that. And to me, there was a lot of energy of tradition and its conflict with progress and how that can kind of manifest in really extreme ways. And that to me was kind of the energy of the conflict between the family and Eve. It's not about like that exclusively, but it's definitely orbits those ideas. And so for me, it just felt like the most fitting thing. And once it was in my head, I couldn't see like putting um a heterosexual couple in that house just didn't feel like the same story at all anymore. It was just way less interesting to me. And especially exploring like I grew up in religious environments where it's obviously very hard to question your sexuality or question anything about your identity. And so for me, it just felt like it couldn't be any other way for this story.
I found it interesting because it was two women, and then you had mental health issues. And I think you're right in that it wouldn't have been the same story if it was a man and a woman. Like, I think it did, for some reason, increase the creepy factor for me in what they were trying to face. And I don't know if that's because I feel like I need someone to protect me. And if I was with a bunch of women, I don't know if it's some weird, like, you're trapped in this weird traditional vision of like what safety is, and if there's a guy in the house maybe you'll feel safe, but there is something about like having two women in the house trying to like figure out what the heck is going on, and then how reliable is what's in her head, just made it so interesting to me.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of inherent tension between religion and a lot of these, progressive movements. And like I said, it immediately ups the tension and it immediately adds a layer of conflict that wouldn't be there otherwise. So
Have you ever been in a situation where someone wouldn't leave but you wanted them to?
I kind of view it as like a metaphor for my whole life. It's not even people.
Why? I don't want to get into a therapy session, but why do you say that?
I mean, it's not even people so much as it is ideas about who I am, ideas about um, religion. I grew up religious. I'm ex-Christian. And so for me, I sort of filtered so many decisions in my life when I was still Christian is like, oh, is this going to let God down? And then once I didn't believe in God anymore, it's like, oh, is this going to let my family down? Or is this going to am I going to hurt this other person's feelings? Like, oh, if they dislike me, that's going to be really, really bad. And it was just kind of accepting that I needed to kind of just push these things out and accept that, I am what I am and I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I need to kind of make my own way. So, yeah, I guess it's a bit metaphorical in that sense.
Okay, let's talk about the end of the book because because you leave it in a way that I'm like, you know, I the end of the book kind of hurt my brain. In your head, what do you think actually happened? What do you think the actual ending of the book is? I know you left it in a way that we're like, who do we believe? What actually happened? But if you were reading this story and you were the person trying to suss this out, even though you wrote it, what happened to Eve?
I mean, I don't want to give anything away.
You can, everyone here has read the book, so you can
I
talk
get,
about
yeah, I
that.
guess even as far as interpretation, but I will say that I really wanted it to be clear that what happened to Eve was external. This
She
wasn't a
was gone.
case. What's that?
Like she was gone. That's how
Yeah,
it
like
is. She
this
is gone. She's physically not there.
exactly, yeah. This isn't in her mind. She isn't living with any sort of she obviously has mental issues like anxiety, but she's not living with something to the level of schizophrenia. And that was actually really important to me to make that as clear as possible because I don't want to. I feel like there's a lot of bad representation of mental illness in
Yeah.
horror, especially schizophrenia or and, more intense forms of mental illness. So I wanted
I
to
think
make
it's
it as
often used
clear
as a crutch for like unreliable narrators is we'll just make them schizophrenic and then we don't know
that,
what's going on.
yeah, and then also it adds to a lot of stigma because like people dealing with mental illness are much more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators of it. And I guess I think most people have interpreted it as something external happened, but obviously not everyone is going to. And I want to leave a tiny bit of wiggle room there, but I will say that something external happened to her, but I'm not going to reveal what that is just yet. And I'll
Is
let
there a
people
point
run
that you will
wild.
reveal? Is there like another book? Is there another reveal coming?
I plan to explore more in this world for sure, is all I can
Okay.
say right now. But yeah, I am aware that there are very many loose ends, and I plan to certainly tie up at least some of them. So.
When it comes to the um I was going to say the video version because of the world I work in. When it comes to the film version of this, would you be upset if they tied up any of those loose ends without consulting you?
No, like I said, I'm very hands off. I don't want to be um I mean, part of me hopes it's similar to the book, but whatever they do is whatever they do. And I would say that I think the more you explain, the less scary it is. For me,
That's true. Yep.
it might be a better story, and it probably would be a better, more satisfying story to explain what happened, but it's almost never going to be scarier. Like I think of stories like movies like The Blair Witch Project,
That's
which is
another one that hurt my brain.
yeah, and it's one that people still talk about to this day. And I think a lot of the power of that film was just you never knew what happened. Even The Shining to some degree, which the film version is obviously very different from King's novel. But The Shining is like you don't really know what the heck happened there in that movie in particular. And um, yeah, it might be a crutch, it might be less satisfying, but It's much
I'm
scarier.
not saying it wasn't satisfying. I'm just saying it broke my brain a little bit.
Yeah, fair enough.
Um, did you base any of your characters off people that you knew?
No, I try to avoid that. Obviously, bits and pieces of people are gonna slip in here and there, but I really try to avoid that. And if I catch myself doing that, I'll do what I can to obscure it. Generally, the furthest I'll go is I'll write with an actor in mind. So not to take away from whichever actor they end up choosing for Thomas, which I'm sure will be a fantastic actor, but the one I had in mind when I was writing was John Hamm. A friend of mine had said
Oh,
that early on that
yeah,
John
I
Hamm with
can
his
see that.
very kind of dapper, um, but he could also kind of do that dopey dad energy if he wanted to. And so I think there's a balance between that. I don't want to say charm, but something there.
He's one of those
And
people that can be charming and creepy, though.
yes, exactly. Very intense.
Intense is probably more the word. I think
Especially in the scenes near the end where he's kind of going all out. I'd love to see. It's helpful for me because I imagine their mannerisms. It helps me to write that actor and it helps me to write that the dialogue of the character and everything. So
I think intense is actually a good word for this book because you really feel that tension build as you're getting closer and closer to the end. I listened to a good portion of it on audiobook while I was on the road, and I didn't realize until someone pointed out to me that there's Morse code. What can you tell me about the Morse code?
yeah, so that's something that started back in my Reddit days. I would post at the end of each story one word in Morse code, and then by the end of a series, you were able to piece them all together, and it would be kind of a cryptic message. And there are very concrete reasons in the lore as to why it's Morse code that I haven't revealed yet. It's not necessarily
Oh,
going to blow anybody's mind when it is revealed, but there are reasons for it within the old house, I guess, universe. And yeah, it's just a fun, creepy kind of thing that definitely gets people talking.
I just thought it sounded really cool. Like it was something that really added to the audio quality of the audiobook. They're all like flipping through the book and noticing the Morse code now. Because you're someone that you really can deep dive on Reddit and talk. Is it fun for you to know that people are trying to figure you and this book out?
It's a lot of fun. I do feel guilty sometimes because we'll put out like a message and there's like an accidental typo and people will start, spending hours deciphering this typo. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Sometimes we'll literally just say, hey guys, that was just a normal typo. But I think every typo in the book, unless there's ones I haven't caught, is intentional. They're usually in the documents. I think they're all in the documents, but yeah.
Cool. Tell me about your writing process now.
Still figuring it out. I'm trying to get into a routine. So when I'm really like full steam ahead, I mean, I'll say my writing process from a writer's life, and then I'll say what I would do if I was working a 9 to 5, because I feel like that's valuable to people that
Yeah.
don't have the privilege that I have, to be writing all the time. So right now it's like get up in the morning, I go to a diner nearby, and I'll just write for 1 to 2 hours. I do it in 30-minute chunks. I always start the day by opening up two windows on my laptop. I'll have a PDF of a screenplay or a novel or a short story that I like, it was like a Stephen King one or Hereditary or whatever, and then I'll have a blank Google Doc. And for 10 minutes, I will just copy it word for word mindlessly, not caring about typos. And not only is it a great way to kind of just, it's like a lubricant to get into the day, but it's also just nothing has improved my writing more than that. I will scream it from the hilltops. Just make sure you draw from a bunch of different styles so you're not, you don't end up aping somebody else's voice. But people say read a lot to learn how to write, but the problem is I get so absorbed in the story I stop thinking about the technicalities. So this kind of, helps me do that. I'll do that for 10 minutes, 5 minutes sometimes, and then I start writing 30-minute chunks, take a break in the middle of the day and then try to do another hour or two after that.
Did you
um
just drop Hereditary in there?
I did, yeah.
So I just watched that for the first
Oh
time
God.
about a week ago. Can I tell you I will never watch that movie again? And there
Boy.
was a point, it is so I have never been so uncomfortable in a movie ever. And that includes when I saw The Ring when I was younger, and I actually screamed at the TV when she climbed out and yelled, "This is horseshit," in the
Right.
theater. We watched it at home, and it's just the point at the end where the guy jumps out the window. This gives nothing away about the storyline. But at the end, when he jumps out the window, my fiance actually looked at me and said, "Me too." Like me,
Yeah.
I am over. We were it is by far the most uncomfortable horror movie I have ever watched.
Yeah, it's very unpleasant, and the real life aspects are almost more disturbing than the horror with
Maybe that's why.
yeah,
Maybe that's why, right?
it's very real, it's very extreme. Uh and obviously I think Toni Collette is the lead actor who just does an incredible job. And yeah.
Yeah, that uncomfortable. So the fact that you're copying that and just mindlessly copying it really gives me a sense of like how committed you are to your craft of living in the horror world, because that's not something I would pick up willy-nilly just to lubricate the brain.
Right, right. Yeah, fair enough.
So now, so you said that that's what you do now, working a 9 to 5, is you do that every morning, you do your writing exercises, and then you write. What did you do when you were working 9 to 5, working in film, doing all those other things? How did you find time?
I mean, this is kind of discouraging, but I honestly rarely did. It wasn't until I got on that $2,000 a month CERB that I was able to have that extra, that financial boot taken off my neck. So it really makes me think about how many people are out there that are just, 1 month or 2 months of just not having to stress about rent to kind of have that breakthrough. But I would say, um, try like 30 minutes a day at the very least if you can. I know it's draining to work a 9 to 5. It can be very tiring, but 30 minutes, if you have time to go on Instagram, if you have time to play video games, you have time to even just the transcribing thing to start, just transcribe for 30 minutes. If you can't do anything else, it's like reading a book. It's like very, it also gets your typing speed up. So I would just say that, and then try to go 30 minutes to an hour if you can, 5 days a week at least. But yeah.
Okay. Um, so when you signed this book deal, did you sign a one book deal? Did you sign a multiple book deal? How did it work for you? I'm always very interested in how first time published authors kind of work their way into the publishing world.
Yeah, so obviously we're coming off the heat of a Netflix sale, so that helped us a lot. But the publisher we ended up going with, the editor Emily Bessler, at Emily Bessler Books under Atria Books at Simon and Schuster. She came in with a 2 book deal right off the bat without even knowing what the second book was, and then the only stipulation was it had to be in the horror genre. And then when we sold my second short story to Universal, then Emily gave us a 3rd book deal off of that. So yeah, so right now I have 2 more books to write that I'm locked in contractually, and it seems like I'll be doing that for the rest of my life. So yeah.
That's amazing. Um, when you say I'm locked into these books, is that daunting to you? Like, or do you have ideas of what you want to write them about?
Yeah, the second one is going to be based on another short story that isn't public. We sold it to Universal with Sydney Sweeney attached to star, and that one I'm already working on adapting my own short story again. And then the third one, I have a bunch of ideas kicking around for that. But yeah, things are well underway. So
I think it's interesting that horror is such a niche. Like it's not for everyone. And I like that this book was creepy but not too scary. We did one of Stephen King's books a few years ago, and I think I traumatized one of or more than one of our people. We did The Long Walk, which was
oh
written
god.
under his other Robert. Oh, I can't think of it off the top of my head. Forgive me. I've been in election mode for a month and my brain's a bit mush. What is it? Robert Bachman. Yes. And I try to do something spooky every October. But this was a good one to get under your skin. But I think that it's a good kind of novel that people introduce them to you and your writing style, and if that's something that they're maybe interested in reading more of. Are there similar authors to your style that you would, if people really liked this one, if this was their first dabble into the horror genre, that you would recommend?
Off the top of my head, I would say Tom. I'm gonna butcher his last name, but it's Thomas Old Hivolt. I believe he's from the Netherlands. I'm probably mixing that country as well, but
What's the
yeah,
book called?
it's called Hex, Hex, and it is incredible. It's a fantastic novel um, about a small town haunted by an undead witch, but they're so used to it that it's become normality for them. And
I love witchy stuff, so that's going on my list.
it's yeah, you'll love it. If you like We Used to Live Here, it's much more it's good. It's great. Yeah, off the top of my head. And then if you like the craziness of We Used to Live Here, then House of Leaves I was heavily influenced by. But if you thought We Used to Live Here was weird, that book takes weird to a whole nother level. Yeah, that's by Mark Z. Danielewski.
Do you have people that you can bounce things? Because you say we a lot, like we sold it to this, we sold it to that. Who is this we? Who are you referring to?
So
Unless you
that's
speak of yourself in the third person.
no, that's I have some very close friends that read everything I write before it goes out, and there'll be my friend Kat, my sibling, my manager now, obviously, and my agents. And then I have other friends too that I'll send it to, and they kind of help me. I embarrass myself to them before I embarrass myself to the public. So they'll be the ones that be like, "Hey, change this," or, you know, these stories definitely wouldn't exist without their help. So
When you say, do you think that you're embarrassing yourself when you write these, or is it just a vulnerable state that you're putting
uh,
yourself in by putting out your brain out there?
it feels a bit like crying in public, and there's nothing wrong with crying, but it is strange to have something that's so close to you and that there's so much of yourself in there, for better or worse, that I don't even know if embarrassing is the right word, but it does feel very vulnerable and uncomfortable sometimes, for sure.
What part of you is in We Used to Live Here?
Um, well, I've had a lot of experiences with, mental health. A lot of my own anxieties are in the book. Then even some of my own experiences are in the book. Nothing supernatural, but I've had a go of it. So it's a very personal story in a lot of ways, and yeah, that's all I'll say on that.
No, that's totally fine. Do you believe in the supernatural?
I've never seen anything to convince me of it, but I really think it's possible. I believe there's a probably pretty good chance that aliens are real. So if that's considered supernatural, then I guess I do, because at that point, pretty much anything's possible if aliens have visited Earth. So that's as far as
Yeah,
I'll go.
I'm mostly curious on the if you're writing about possibilities or if you're creating worlds when you write.
I think I'm creating worlds, but also drawing from real world lore, or, internet lore. Like there's the back rooms, there's House of Leaves, obviously. And so I'm drawing from fictional lore, and I'm drawing from uh, real world lore as well.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to open this up to the room because there are people in here and there's also people on Zoom who may have questions for you. I'm going to start backwards tonight because I usually start in the room. Is there anyone online that would like to ask Marcus a question? If so, just unmute yourself, which is totally fine. There's usually at least one.
You
Okay.
press the mic to unmute yourself.
We have no questions. That is shocking to me. Okay, I'm going to turn this around because I know Natasha will ask at least two questions. Okay, people in the room, go
Hi.
ahead, take your turns. He can see you, you can see them. Ask your question. You can ask as many as you like.
Um, yeah, I'm really curious about this having started as on Reddit, and I'm wondering, how do I say this? You talked about, I really liked how you talked about your writing process and kind of what you call putting up these little scouts. And I'm wondering if you think that writing this as a series on Reddit affected in any way any of the loose ends or any of like
Like where it could have gone?
where it could have gone and morphed the book over time. That was a really phrased question. But I'm just curious about writing as a series on Reddit. Are you seeing the book as a whole, or is it then pieces that you're trying to put together into a whole after that?
Yeah, I think it was kind of difficult adapting something I'd already written, especially because it was, it had a beginning and an end. And the analogy I've used, it was like kind of taking a car I've already built and then having to take that car apart and turn it into a bus. And yeah, it was frustrating because I'm constantly thinking about the Reddit ending. I'm constantly thinking about all this other stuff. I'm having to find ways to expand it. And I'm very much about tight pacing and all that. And so I'm always looking what I can cut. And this was the opposite. I'm like, how can I make this longer? Um, so I think ultimately ended up being raising more questions that didn't have answers. And I definitely view it as a dot 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 at the end. So there is definitely more to be said on the world, if that answers the question.
Do you do you know the answers to all the questions the book raises?
Most of them I have at least 2 or 3 answers, and I kind of have a way to adjust if I need to. There's some that I know exactly what the answer is, and then there's other ones where I'm like, you know what, it could be this, or it could be this, or it could be this, and I'm not quite settled on which one it is. And that can change for any reason. It can be, well, if a better idea comes along, or it can be somebody figures it out, and I don't want people to figure it out, so I have to come up with something else. But um, yes and no. Yes and no.
That's so cool. Um, did the was the website ever active?
Yeah, I believe every website in the book you can visit, and I believe there's an email there that might or might not respond. It's apparently been pretty crowded according to people I've been talking to, so it might be a while before you get a response, but it will respond. And yeah, there's a whole kind of online rabbit hole if you really want to go down that. But it's definitely supplementary. It's not necessary to the book. Like if I ever do write a sequel, you won't have to go down the online rabbit hole to appreciate that sequel, but will definitely be extra spice in the soup, I guess.
Oh, I went online and then I realized I had to leave my house, so I just
Uh,
I was on vacation. I'm like, this is ridiculous.
yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
But no, that's very cool. Okay.
I
Any other
guess
questions? Oh, go on.
just to expand on one other thing you had asked, what was the second last question you asked?
Do you know the answers to all the questions? Is that what I
Right.
asked?
Okay. Yeah. So there's a show called Breaking Bad. It's pretty famous. But the writers of that show, I listen to a lot of their podcasts because it's just great writing advice, and they will set up things like they'll have a main character put a bomb in a trunk or something, for an example, at the beginning of one season, and in the writers' room, they don't even know what that bomb is going to be used for. They don't know when, and they have to write in 6 months while they're shooting what happens with that bomb. And almost every time it seems like they had planned it from the start, but a lot of it they're just flying by the seat of their pants, kind of like improvised jazz. And so that kind of made me calm down a little bit in trying to know the answer to everything. And sometimes like, you know what, this just feels right. I'm just going to lean into it. And then that's a problem for my future self to figure out. But yeah.
Marcus, can I ask a follow-up to Natasha's question, which you just won't see me? What did you add? Like how much did you actually have to grow the Reddit story to the book we see today? Like, did you have to double it? Did you have to triple it? Like, how much did you actually have to grow it?
I think the Reddit story is about 20,000 words and the novel is around 75,000. So yeah, definitely more than tripled it. And I'm doing that again with this next book, and it's the last time I'm ever adapting a short into a novel because it's just not how my brain works at all. It's much more work than just kind of starting from scratch.
Any other questions from out there? Don't be shy. Go ahead. Yeah.
Disorder that he has in your short story, was that in there, or?
Can you hear
I
her?
guess it must be where she was seeing imposters and like the changed reality. That was already in the short story as well, and the information about.
Can you hear her?
What was the question? She was asking if the changed reality was in the short story as well.
Yes.
And and if it was, where did you get that idea to use that particular disorder?
So that was in the very original short. So there was a 1-part short that isn't online anymore, and then I expanded that into a 4-part short, and it has always been in there. And I actually wasn't familiar with the disorder until after I'd written it. So I figured I at least needed to have a nod to that. Because there is, there are people that really experience that, and imagining they've been replaced with an imposter or somebody they know has been replaced with an imposter, and it just sounds like such a terrifying thing to experience. Thankfully, it's quite a rare disorder. But in Eve's case, she doesn't have that disorder. It's actually happening to her. So I wanted to make that distinction clear as well. Yeah.
Where did you get the idea from? Is what else she asked.
I don't even know. I think, oh, it's from a Stephen King quote. So it's he talks about the 3 types of horror, and he talks about there's the first type, which is the I guess the slasher. It's the guy that jumps out with a knife and stabs the person. And then there's a second type that's the kind of the gross out thing. It's like vomiting a bunch of worms or something. And then there's the third type, which is coming home and realizing that everything in your house has been replaced with an exact replica of itself, and the thing that did it is standing right behind you, and when you turn, there's nothing there. And that he calls the kind of more pure, uncanny terror. And I guess I kind of ripped that quote off wholesale and turned it into a whole story, so hopefully he doesn't come after me. But yeah, that's where I think it was initially sparked.
That's dark.
Yeah.
Have you, have you read or seen Behind Her Eyes?
No, I haven't.
Okay. It's a novel. I admittedly, I watched it on Netflix, did not know it was a novel. I hate when that happens. The Netflix series, it's a mini series. It's great as well. And I was watching, because apparently like I have no sense of self-care. I was watching it while also reading your book. And
Oh man.
it's that kind of uncanny thriller and like the doubting your own mental state and what's real or not. And to a much lesser degree than your book. But anyway, I just thought I would throw it out there if you're looking for something to copy down.
Yeah, I'll check that out. Another one was I haven't seen the movie, but I've read the book Ian Reid's I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which definitely exists in that very uncanny something is wrong, but I can't quite put a finger on it feeling, and just building off of that. I read that book after I read We Used to Live Here, but I wish I had read it before because I would have drawn from it a little bit.
The weird thing with that one is like very little happens in actuality in that story, and you're still so terrified.
Yeah, you're like, there's a
Feel
scene
so
with some,
uncomfortable, and you're like, nothing's actually really oh god.
like the scene in the ice cream shop. It's like nothing's happening, but it just feels like a nightmare. Yeah.
I read the ice cream again, and I hate it.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I will turn this back around instead of making like staring you down with a camera. Okay. I have a few last minute questions and then we will wrap this up. Won't keep
Cool.
you too long, even though you're in a better time zone than we are. Uh, what's the best book you've read lately?
I just read a book called A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen L. Peck. And if you like liminal space, it's about a guy that ends up in hell and finds out that it's a nearly infinite, but not quite infinite library of books filled with every possible permeation of words ever. And you have to find the book that has your life story in it. And it's weird because there are moments of terror and horror in it, but it's more about the existential dread of mundanity. And it's very short and it is just so well written. And yeah, it's one of those books like I could have read a 10 book series on it. Like he just casually just brushes over things that I would have spent like 10 chapters on, but very cool world building, really, really interesting book. A Short Stay in Hell.
Top 3 horror movies that you'd recommend?
Oof. Off the top of my head, I'm gonna go with Get Out by Jordan Peele. I'm gonna go with Hereditary just because I was so heavily influenced by it, but watch at your own peril. And the Blair Witch Project. I think that movie was influencing me before I even saw it because kids in my class were talking about it and everybody thought it was real. And it just ends with such a bizarre, unexplainable image, and it's never explained. And so, as frustrating as that can be to some people, that really influenced me a lot because you never find out what the Blair Witch is. You hear like 5 different theories about what it could be, and then it just kind of ends. And yeah.
What are you listening to for music when you do all of these things?
I'm listening to the score of the movie Prisoners, and the incredible composer's name is slipping my mind right now, but it's the Denis Villeneuve film Prisoners with Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal. And yeah, it's just the perfect writing score for this type of story. It's very brooding and very wintry feeling, and um, yeah. And if it's not that, it's just white noise, rain or white noise to just kind of drown out everything else. But
I was really hoping you were gonna pop off with Ariana Grande or something.
no, too distracting.
If you're not reading, writing, or watching horror, what is your next favorite genre?
I'm big into I guess comedy right now. I'm liking I'm getting to a show called Hacks, which is very funny. Yeah, and it's a nice counterbalance to all the suffering and misery of horror. So
Best piece of advice you were given as a new writer?
I would say it's the thing I repeat a lot is the allow yourself a shitty first draft. And I take it a step further and say allow yourself a shitty story. And just kind of get it out there. And then in Stephen King's book on writing, he talks about how he used to post every rejection letter from magazines and publications up on his wall because it was like, I don't know if this is actually how he says it, but it's like evidence that he's trying, that he's doing something. And that's like, most people don't have a single rejection letter on their wall, and it's not because they're a good writer, it's because they never submitted it or they never tried. And now we live in a world where you can post to Reddit completely for free, completely anonymously. So there's even less excuse to not try. Um, Yeah.
If you got to sit down with Stephen King for half an hour, what would you talk to him about?
Oh my God. After like getting over my 10 minutes of being starstruck, I would probably, yeah, I'd probably just want to pick his brain about like his approach to writing. I know he talks a lot about it in On Writing. And then how he's, you know, kept his sanity through all this. Obviously, I'm nowhere near his level, but even with my modest amount of success, it's been quite a roller coaster. So I think he's obviously had his struggles with a bunch of issues, but he's still like a grounded guy. He's a family man, and yeah, just how he managed to keep all that and keep his sanity. Um, yeah.
Okay. If people want to find you on Reddit, if they want to follow you and where you're going, and your dark storytelling trove, where do they do that?
So if you're interested in expanded lore, check out r/old house archive on Reddit. And you can also find some of my old stories. They're probably not very good, but you can find them r/polter kites. So it's polter and then kites, like a kite. And polter, like the first part of poltergeist. And my Instagram is just my full name. So Marcus_Kliever, Kliewer. And yeah, that's kind of the main places I'm active right now.
Is there anything you want to add that I didn't ask about or touch on?
I think yeah, just if you want to be a writer, just write and just kind of, try to at least get 5 minutes a day. Usually if you do 5 minutes, you're gonna at least do a bit more. And yeah, there's a world out there where I didn't kind of do that little push through that few months, and I'm still landscaping. Nothing wrong with landscaping. I actually quite loved that job, but I definitely prefer writing novels. So, um, yeah, it's better to try than to wonder, for sure.
Well, congratulations on all your success. Thanks for making an hour for us tonight. And we'll literally be watching on TV and looking for the new books.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming.